How you doing, guys? Welcome back to Invested Intelligence. So I'm going to get straight into this. We're going to talk about the 4-hour chart of Bitcoin, maybe a broad sweep as well of the sort of overall cryptocurrency market. But I want to focus predominantly on the 4-hour chart. We know where we are on the weekly. Obviously, we've had a nice little reversal. It's currently Thursday. It's the 16th of November. Tomorrow, there's going to be some news regarding the whole sort of ETF stuff. But for now, I want to talk about when you have a fixed idea on the monthly, the weekly, and the daily. It's good to drop down to the 4-hour chart to start to get a feel for what that looks like, how it's fleshed out, what the structure looks like, and if it's giving you any clues as to what's going to happen over the next sort of 2 to 3 weeks. Now, I want to preface the video by saying we are coming up to the Christmas period. Things are going to start to slow down after the last week of November going into the first week of December. You do start to get a huge volume drop off, and the volatility can increase because the less volume, there's a less liquid market effectively. So it doesn't take a lot to move the markets. So if we just drop down to the daily, just kind of zoom out a little bit, and we can see we've had this really nice sort of run. We've come through this 32,000 and now we're kind of hovering around 36 to 38,000. Now, when you drop down to the 4-hour chart, and you have to do this with the idea of the weekly in mind, especially the weekly. We know where the weekly is at. We know it's looking good. But the thing that kind of caught my attention yesterday, and the reason why, I took this trade. So I grabbed Bitcoin here, and I offloaded right here, right? The reason I did this, and I mentioned this before, I actually put a voice recording in my Discord. If you're not in the Discord, links in the description below. And the reason I did that was because I was looking at the 4-hour chart of Bitcoin and I was getting I want to say excited, but more focused on what's happening on the sort of lower timeframes as opposed to these higher timeframes, because I know what the higher timeframes are doing. And the 4-hour was showing a really good indication that we're probably going to get a little bit of a spike. Now, if I just show you here, and this is important, right? When we had the most recent drop on Bitcoin, you see Bitcoin was retracing a little bit after this really nice run up. It hits the 37,417 level, right? Slightly over, responds really nicely to that, and then it starts to come down. You see that capitulatory move. This is mini capitulation, right? So you can see price starts to accelerate, and then it just drops. And as it drops, it's taking out this low and it's dipping into this area of liquidity. And this is where you start to get really refined LPs, or liquidity pools. Nope, thank you. Really refined liquidity pools. It dips into that really nicely, but it also rebalances over here. So it takes out a low, it dips into an LP, it rebalances, and we get a really nice response away from that. So as price is kind of sitting here, it's almost, I don't want to say it's a guarantee, but I've seen this so many times before. And because I know the weekly is in control, I know the monthly is in control. So, these higher time frame levels are very, very strong. It's more 90 to 95% you're likely to get a pop. So it revisits this previous level of 38,000. So I grabbed it at 36,346, I believe it was, or 36,345, somewhere around there. And obviously we've had a really nice pop, and then kind of scaled out just up here. It was just one full scale out, to be fair. Well, I didn't scale out, I basically just sold the lot. So a really, really nice trade. The question is, when you arrive at a conclusion before you take a trade, especially on the 4-hour chart, right? 4-hour and hourly, when you're sticking to these really solid timeframes, 4-hour, hourly, and not dropping down to the 15 or the 5-minute, and looking at all of this kind of crazy mess, when you drop down to the 15, it's very noisy, very, very noisy on the 15, especially on the 5 as well, really, really noisy on the 5-minute, right? But when you're looking at the 4-hour chart, it takes a long time for these candles to form, and a long time, over the span, in some cases, of a week, 2 weeks, possibly even 3 weeks, to flesh out a complete 4-hour move based on the weekly and the monthly, right? So it's important to have confidence when you see something that makes sense, to take that trade knowing you have a previous range of at least 4 hours to work with, as opposed to a previous range of 5 minutes or 15 minutes. What I mean by that is, when I entered the trade here on Bitcoin, I entered on the premise, right, that we've had all of this context, and order flow confirming the higher time frame bias, right? And then obviously a really nice pop. So it's a nice impulse. It stabilizes, and you can look at this and say, right, that is a 4-hour candle, not a 5-minute candle, not a 2-minute candle, not a 15-minute candle, a very strong 4-hour candle. So we have a range to play with. Don't really want, sort of Bitcoin coming below 35.6, 35.5. If it does, it's removing or invalidating this previous 4-hour movement. And as such, because we're really not close to that, and I let it dip a little bit, and I kind of entered this into the 4-hour candle, this 4-hour candle, not this one, but this one, right? So I'm waiting for that additional context, that additional information to confirm and give me confidence, right? That grabbing Bitcoin here is probably the right thing to do. Now, the pop, yeah, I'm not going to say that I expected, an explosive move, but I did expect price to come back up here. I just thought it would take a little bit longer. It is possible as Bitcoin's pulling back now, and let me just clean this up a little bit. But it is possible now that Bitcoin's just pulling back a little, right? That we, stabilize here, but then continue. Obviously tomorrow's a big deal, in terms of news. I think somebody mentioned in the Discord, Lobo, he was saying basically, buy the rumor, sell the news. We've heard this many, many times. And obviously a lot of stuff's going on, in terms of like the ETF idea. So this could go both ways. I was expecting 40k. It is possible that it's still on the cards, but as it starts to pull back on the 4-hour, now we have to jump back up and remind ourselves of what the weekly is actually doing. We started the week, we dropped. Okay, so we started the week, we dropped. It's currently Thursday, going into Friday, tomorrow, and then the weekend. We've had a nice retracement, and it's starting to stabilize in this area. So the following week, we may get that final pop into the 40, or tomorrow if the news isn't favorable. And I'm not saying to believe the news or to use the news as you're trading, but if that's not viable, or something isn't, correct, or people don't respond to it favorably, and it is a buy the rumor, sell the news, then on the news tomorrow, there's also a very, very high possibility that we start to get a little bit of a retracement, with this 32,000 being in play still on any pullback. Not that tomorrow, if the news isn't favorable and people do sell on this news, or prior to the news, that price is going to come all the way down. I want to be really clear. I'm not saying price is going to come all the way down to 32,000, although it is a possibility. What I'm saying is, if people do sell tomorrow, or even before tomorrow, okay, the stabilization up in this area can effectively put us in one of two positions. We either start to stabilize more, or we start to pull back, right? And if we start to pull back, then we have to drop down to some of the lower time frames. It's really, really simple. You keep things really, really simple. We've had an explosion. We've had a run up. It's come back down, okay? We've had a nice impulse, okay? That was the one that we was talking about yesterday. And now it's starting to pull back. This is your reference point right here. If this is taken out, right? This is the reference point. That's where the liquidity was grabbed. That's where the rebalancing happened. That's where the reversal happened. Pop, right? If this is reversed and price gets anywhere near this tail or this wick, okay, it is likely that we're going to continue going lower. Why? Because we have a very strong level that price is being drawn to, if possible. And we also have an imbalance over here that price could potentially want to come into and rebalance a little bit, and so on. Okay, so these are our reference points. We don't have to guess. We simply don't have to guess. We can look at what we're seeing on the charts and use that, as viable information to take informed decisions, right? Especially when it comes to our trading and investing. So that's where it is, or that's where we're at with, with Bitcoin. Let me take this off. Just jumping over to Binance a little bit. Again, we're getting a little bit of a run up on Binance. Key area up here. I'm going to, kind of extend this out a little bit as well. In fact, let's make it clean. Okay, and this level comes in at 304. We could continue grinding up a little bit, but the movement that we're seeing on Binance, again, isn't akin to something that looks structurally sound to me personally, right? I would need to see a lot more for me to even consider getting into Binance. There's actually money to be made elsewhere. I think Binance still has a lot of problems. It's not something that I'm considering. And I don't know why it keeps doing that, but I actually read something recently. Somebody made a comment about 2-3 months ago in one of the Discords that I just kind of, I did a search for my name just to see, if anybody mentioned anything. Sometimes it's easier than to kind of go scrolling back. And somebody said, LSP is always negative. No, I'm not. I'm not negative at all. I'm clinical. I like to be clinical. Like I've mentioned many, many times, there's many people that bought at 200. Fair play to you, man. Very, very happy for you. The bottom line is I want everybody to make money. That's great. It's just not for me. I want to see stability. I want to see real signs, of price moving, and then we have that kind of, if we're in a position where, for example, with if a project basically launches at this time, on the Binance Smart Chain, there's a very real possibility, that they end up taking a bit of a hit. So it's kind of a catch-22 because sometimes, your back's up against the wall and you just want to launch, for example, right? Or you want to take advantage of Bitcoin moving, or Binance moving. But ultimately, it's a decision that has to be has to be made based on what you're seeing as structural integrity in terms of the charts, and what's happening with, in this case, Binance, and some of the news and some of the, continued back and forth with the SEC. Of which, to be honest, because I've kind of pulled myself away a little bit from the news, I don't really read much, regarding Binance, but I'm sure it's out there, and at some point over the next couple of weeks, I am going to kind of knuckle down before the Christmas period and really do a lot of research. But for now, I'm not seeing any indications. I'm not seeing any COT data that says, things are heavily towards the bullish side or heavily towards the, the short side. I just think price is being manipulated on pretty much everything, right? So people can use retail money as exit liquidity. Outside of that, gold, again, still doing well. Okay, so I'm very happy with this. You can see monthly, really nice sort of stability in monthly charts. So I think we're still going to see 2,100. Very confident with that. We'll keep an eye on Baba. I do believe this is going to continue going lower. The worse this does, the better it is for for our case. In terms of a bearish undertone. And that kind of undercurrent across all global markets, and I'm not saying it's just all resting on Alibaba, but this is a big player, and obviously it just shows, strength or weakness within the the Chinese economy. And you can see we're already down pre-market, almost $8, well, less, about $7, so it's currently at 79.95, maybe a slightly lower. So we're basically going to be gapping down here, and I would assume, just based on what we're seeing, I mean, look at this, you're talking about all of this movement, and then literally one gap, or one gap removes all of that work that was done. So again, continuation to the downside, plenty of reasons why this could continue going lower. And again, something to definitely keep an eye on. And then outside of that, I don't think there's much else. If I just go over to the SPY, SPY is holding well, and again, we discussed this in the live, not really much to go into regarding this one. Don't really want to talk about alts because there's no real point. Not seeing anything that's really standing out. Doge, I know some people are interested in this. It is starting to move a little bit, but I think it's a byproduct of sympathy of, sort of Bitcoin moving. And you've got to remember as well, if Bitcoin takes a hit tomorrow, or going into the close of this year, and it does start to pull back, even if this is the turning point and we are starting to see the semblance, or not semblance, but we are starting to see this kind of overall multi-year run, and that is a big if, then we are going to see a pullback at some point, and that pullback is going to, sort of drag the rest of the market down with it and offer opportunities to get into altcoins, Bitcoin, Binance, and so on, at favorable, under favorable conditions, but with more context and more confidence, because you're seeing that structurally sound basis, right, to get into, whatever you're trying to get into. So with that said, I hope everyone's having a fantastic day or evening wherever you are in the world, and I look forward to speaking to you very, very soon. All the best. Take care. Ciao for now.